If you're seeing shifts in your period, or you're not having a period, or you're having a really painful period, it's a sign that your body needs deeper attention. And just waiting isn't going to solve the solution. This is one of the biggest myths that is perpetuated by conventional medicine. No wonder that women don't have a clue what's happening in their own body because we aren't informed on it. You can't out supplement a bad diet. What if I gain weight? What if I'm going to be ugly? What if I'm going to be unhealthy? You're not alone. Irregular periods and missing periods don't mean you're broken. Welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync, the podcast for women looking to have a safe and empowering transition off birth control and wanting to heal their hormones naturally. So last week we talked about the root causes for painful periods and how birth control doesn't actually fix your painful periods, it masks them. So we talked all about the different root causes, including inflammation, stress, mineral deficiencies, so much more. So if you are listening to this and you're kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, today we're finishing out this series about period problems. We're talking about the opposite problem when you're having a missing or irregular period, specifically after stopping birth control. And if you have been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that this is a huge part of my own hormone healing journey. When I was 18 years old, I lost my period and I was immediately put on birth control and told, just stay on it till you want to get pregnant and it'll bring your period back. There's no long-term consequences. And so I thought everything was good. And I was like, okay, this solves my problem. Like many of us do. We're like, okay, just take this pill and it makes us better. What I didn't realize was it wasn't actually solving my missing period, right? When you're on birth control, you're not ovulating. Therefore, you're not having a true period. And there are many adverse side effects to being on birth control that doctors should be telling women so they can make an informed decision on their own. But I was not told that, and many women are not told that. Whenever you take a medication, you should be aware of and informed of the potential side effects for it. So I was on birth control for over 10 years, thinking that it was giving me a period until I learned that I was not getting a period for 10 years. And the true reason I was put on it wasn't actually doing its job. So when I stopped, I had a terrible time. I struggled with horrible acne, anxiety. My period was still irregular. We're going to chat about why. And I basically was given no other solutions other than to go back on birth control. So that's what really led me to open my private practice and pursue the world of functional hormone nutrition, and why I'm so passionate about this, because it happened to me and I know it happens to a lot of you. So I want to bring light to this conversation. And the first thing I wanted to say, and to say again rather, is remember that birth control is not giving you a period. This is one of the biggest myths out there that grinds my gears all the time. Whenever I go into the gynecologist's office or my doctor's office, the walls are paper thin. Like there is no HIPAA in terms of like that. But I was waiting for my gynecologist to come in and to see me this past time. And I heard the woman on the other side of the room, the nurse, talking to another patient and her asking, how are your periods? I don't know what the girl said. She said something, and then she asked, how is your birth control going? And I just wanted to like rip my hair out and like scream, be like, you're not having a period on birth control. This is one of the biggest myths that is perpetuated by conventional medicine. And no wonder that women don't have a clue what's happening in their own body because we aren't informed on it. We aren't taught this. This is one of the many things we should have been taught in school. So if you haven't also listened to my previous 2 episodes about methods for non-hormonal birth control, and last week's episode, or actually 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I did a deep dive with Vicky Shahadi. She's a certified FAM coach, fertility awareness method. This is something that you can figure out if you're actually ovulating, because one of the big things, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but one of the big things is when you stop birth control, you might start bleeding right away. you might start, you think like, oh, I'm getting my period. I thought that. I actually technically I started bleeding right when I stopped birth control. And I was like, cool, my body's working. Like, I can't believe after 10 years and, being put on it for not having a period, like my body's working. It wasn't until later, after doing some functional testing, that I actually discovered my hormone levels, specifically progesterone, were tanked so low. Um, and that means that you're actually not ovulating. So listen to that episode, whether you are just wanting to learn more about your body, wanting to get your period back so you can conceive. Either option is it's really, really important to know when you're ovulating or not. And so we talk about how to use cervical mucus and your temperature to help you identify if you're actually having a true period after coming off. It doesn't just mean you're bleeding, you have to be ovulating too. That's very, very important. I just met with a new VIP client of mine, and she stopped birth control a couple months ago, and she is bleeding, but she's not ovulating because her estrogen and progesterone are really, really low due to stress, malnutrition, a bunch of different factors. So we're going to work on that in relation to her hormonal acne that she has on her chin and her jaw after stopping. So I kind of I went through like what we're talking about today with missing periods, irregular periods, did some myth busting around that. I think the other myth I want to bust before we dive into reasons is that it's common for people to be missing their period after stopping birth control, especially the pill. And although it's common, it's not normal. So doctors also fail women in this way where they say, oh, we'll just wait for it to come back or give it some more time. Your periods is your fifth vital sign. It's right up there with respiration, with heart rate. It's super, super important. And so if you aren't having a period, some people call it your monthly report card because it's so important. If you're seeing shifts in your period, or you're not having a period, or you're having a really painful period, it's a sign that your body needs deeper attention. And just waiting isn't going to solve the solution. You need tangible data and you need tangible steps to get your period back or to solve your period issues. And that's what I do in my practice versus just waiting, because I've never seen that actually work. People just keep coming back and they're like, I'm still having the same problem. And most of the time, doctors just say, we'll go back on birth control, which isn't a solution. So, though it's common, it's not normal. And I want you to feel empowered that if you're not being listened to, you are entitled to fire your doctor and get support elsewhere, whether it's with me or a different provider. So, potential reasons why your period is irregular or missing. And when I say irregular, just to clarify that, it's longer than your normal cycle would be. And you know, everyone's cycle is different. So, for some people, it's 28 days. For some people, it's 25 days. For some people, it's longer than that. It's like 32 days. But irregular cycles, if you're going, you know, months without having a period, and then you might have some light spotting, then it might come back. It's all over the place. It's really chaotic. Or you just have like a plain missing period after stopping. No bleeding, no ovulating, nothing. The first reason why this could be happening is something called hypothalamic amenorrhea, or HA. I'm going to be referring to it as HA because hypothalamic amenorrhea is a mouthful. HA is caused by undereating, overexercising, or other major stressors on the body. This could be trauma, physical, mental, emotional. Some signs that you may have HA are you are struggling maybe with your relationship with food, or you are feeling like you have to eat really healthy, there's stress or anxiety, you restrict any particular food group. So a lot of times I see women really heavily focusing on protein. I should do another episode on this because I am just so over the protein trend. Like, yes, it's important, but so are carbs and fats, specifically for hormones. Carbs and fats are king and queen. They deserve to, they do not deserve to have the bad rap that they do. They deserve to be on a pedestal. But a lot of women, we're on this like high protein kick, low carb kick, and that can negatively damage your hormones and cause a missing period. There's some research alone showing that even if you're eating enough calories, but you're not eating enough carbohydrates, can cause you to lose ovulation or to stop ovulating and therefore stop having your menstrual cycle. So carbs and fats are really, really important. So if you're restricting food for any reason and your period is irregular, missing, that's a huge sign that it's probably from that, and it's probably from dietary stress factors. Same thing over exercising. If you have difficulty taking rest days, you have anxiety if you have to adjust your routine, you're working out for hours at the gym. Um, you are trying to hit X number of steps per day. There's a lot of nervosa around exercise and fueling for exercise or under fueling for exercise. This is where, my background working with eating disorders, I saw this all the time with HA, but doctors don't typically diagnose this. They will more often diagnose PCOS, or they won't even diagnose anything and they'll say, oh, that's normal for an active person, or for someone your age, just take birth control, which there's a lot wrong with that. Um, but if you have a past history of an eating disorder, disordered eating, which was my case, I thought I was eating healthy, but actually I was struggling with disordered eating that everyone else just thought was healthy. Or because of my age and because I was active, I was told it's just normal to lose your period. That is not. It's common, but it's not normal. So we want to bring light to HA because it is oftentimes underdiagnosed or it might be misdiagnosed as PCOS. So I just had someone who reached out to me in my Instagram DMs and we were chatting, and she was her doctor said she probably has PCOS. She stopped birth control and she hadn't had a period for a really long period of time, months at a time. And she ended up signing up for my birth control reset. And right away, I was like, you're under eating. And I messaged her and I was like, hey, can you send me some food logs and can I look through this? She was classic looking at protein, like really heavily focusing on protein. She was exercising almost every single day, really under eating on carbs, fats, and just overall calories. I'm like, this isn't PCOS. This is HA. And so I shared that with her in my review that I sent. And she messaged me back and she was like, I was in tears listening to this because this was so validating. I kind of thought this was going on, but my doctor just said, eat less carbs, eat healthier, take these supplements to balance your blood sugar and see how you do, which is the exact opposite of what someone with HA should be hearing and doing. You can't out supplement a bad diet. And she was already really focused on eating too healthily, which was tipping over to be disordered. And so when her doctor said, just reduce carbs, exercise more, balance your blood sugar, she heard like, oh, I'm not healthy enough. I need to double down and do this more, which was actually harming her body more. So this is something we cannot play around with because your period is such an important indicator of your health. We really have to dig deep and figure out what's going on for you. And for many women, it's HA. We live in a toxic diet culture where it's normal to underfuel yourself. It's normal to be stressed. It's normal to grind yourself to the ground, to work out all the time, just do it, like mantra of like, even if you got 2 hours of sleep last night, just wake up and do your 6 a.m. workout, like regardless. I work a lot with my clients of pulling back away from that toxic diet culture to really heal their hormones. And that is the hard shit. That is the hard shit because this is a mindset thing too. This is the fear of what if I gain weight? What if I'm going to be ugly? What if I'm going to be unhealthy? And this is where a lot of times I'll loop in, we'll have a therapist on the team. We might bring a therapist on to work on some of the body image stuff or to work on some of the deeper rooted issues around food, that maybe it's out of my scope to do. So HA is a serious problem, something to look into, and solutions for getting your period back if you're struggling with HA is first and foremost increasing calorie intake. So it's eating more, upwards of 2,500 calories per day. Some women need more. Reducing stress, which under eating alone, over exercising alone is stress, and scaling back on intense workouts. So I recommend reducing any activity. I mean, ideally, we're taking a complete break from exercise, and that in and of itself is hard. I know when I was going through this, I had to do that, and that was tough. That was really, really tough because it was also a way that I, manage my mental health. So I had to really find other ways to navigate that and to, other hobbies or other things to fill my time. So I wasn't just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, being like, oh, well, I just feel like a bum. Like I feel gross or I don't feel great. So finding other things to do is really, really important outside of exercise. And this is where working with a professional to work on the mindset around this can be really helpful as well if that's too challenging to do on your own, which there's no shame in that. That's where having a team and having that ongoing support is really beneficial. All right. The next thing is PCOS. So like I said, this is oftentimes, and I don't want to say obviously it's a thing. Like I believe it's a true diagnosis, but it is one of those things I feel like sometimes it's like IBS where it's like, okay, we can't figure out what's wrong with you, but like you have some cysts on your ovaries, like we're just going to say it's PCOS. And it's actually normal to have some cysts on your ovaries. There's specific diagnostic criteria for PCOS, but a lot of times it's overdiagnosed or misdiagnosed, especially after stopping birth control. It's kind of it's when doctors jump the gun and they're like, okay, well, we don't really know what's going on, but it appears hormonal. And we might do like a ultrasound and you have some cysts on your ovaries. We're going to say it's PCOS. And a lot of times they'll recommend a medication. Usually it's metformin, which there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not against medications. I'm not against birth control. You all hopefully know that at this point. And it's not truly solving the deeper rooted issue. So, like I said, the client who I was just referring to who did the birth control reset, she was misdiagnosed with PCOS when she actually had hypothalamic amenorrhea. And that was actually really harmful to her. So I'm glad I was able to shed light on that and to validate her and to get her the support she needed. That being said, I want to highlight some key differences between HA and PCOS. So you can kind of like determine if you're maybe like waffling of like which one, or maybe you're in the boat where you've had an irregular period or missing period after birth control and your doctor has diagnosed you with PCOS or mentioned it and you're like, ooh, now you're making me second guess this, or maybe I'm thinking a little bit more about this. The root cause, so HA is caused by energy deficiency and stress. So not eating enough, malnutrition, overexercising, stress. While PCOS is, I don't want to say it's more complex, but it does have multiple different root causes. It's like a combination of things. So it is hormonally bound. So there's a hormonal imbalance, often involving insulin resistance, inflammation, and high androgens. So some symptoms of this could include hirsutism, which is basically hair where you shouldn't have hair. So for women, it's going to be like your chest, facial hair, but then not enough hair where you should have hair. So not enough hair on your head or like losing hair. This can get complicated because with HA, if you're deprived of nutrition, you can also be losing your hair. But you probably won't have hirsutism because you're not going to be having hair where it shouldn't be, like on your chest. You might just be losing your hair or thinning of the hair. Hormone levels. So if you've ever gotten your hormone levels tested, that's something a lot of docs will do. HA, low estrogen, low progesterone, low FSH, and LH, follicular stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. So you're just low in things. PCOS, on the other hand, you're going to have high LH, high androgens, and high insulin levels. I see high insulin levels in a lot of cases, honestly, because if you're malnourished, there is probably some insulin resistance happening. So again, some of these things are nuanced, but I just want to bring light to this. This is really where working with a one-on-one with a practitioner and overviewing your custom labs is helpful. Ovulation. So in HA, you're not ovulating due to energy deficiency. PCOS, you might have inconsistent ovulation due to hormonal imbalances. And with ultrasounds, HA might show that there aren't cysts on the ovaries. There might be some, but PCOS may show cysts. But again, you can't just confirm or diagnose PCOS just with ovaries or just with cysts on the ovaries. If you're kind of listening to this and you're like, okay, no, I do think I have true PCOS, then we have to also think about what's causing that, right? Like what's causing the inflammation. So we need to reduce inflammation. This isn't just eating fruits and vegetables. There's a lot more to this. It's, working with insulin resistance if that's happening, increasing minerals if you're low in minerals. So, for example, magnesium is really important for blood sugar regulation and insulin. Making sure you're eating enough. Don't reduce carbs. That's a big thing. So, a lot of times, if there's insulin resistance, doctors will rec a low carb diet. That's going to do more harm than good because your body needs carbs to produce that glucose versus having spikes and dips in glucose, which can lead to that insulin resistance. And balancing hormones, which there's a lot that goes into balancing hormones. This is your minerals, this is your gut work, this is lots and lots of things that underlie the hormone imbalances. Also, I don't think I mentioned this, but with PCOS diagnosis, so we talked about cysts on the ovaries. Um, you know, it's called the Rotterdam criteria. This is what doctors will use. They use like 2 out of the 3 criteria to diagnose PCOS. So if you have irregular periods, which is common, not normal, but common, high androgens based on blood work or symptoms, so acne, hirsutism, and polycystic ovaries on an ultrasound. If you have 2 of those things, which most of you listening are going to have irregular periods, right? Then you're likely going to be diagnosed with PCOS, which that's very vague criteria. So that's what I want to highlight here. Doesn't mean you don't, doesn't mean it's not real. I just want you to critically think about this and, maybe invest in some labs to make for sure this is actually what's going on because there could be tons of other stuff that's happening. The third reason, the final reason that you might have an irregular or missing period after stopping birth control is stress and trauma. So we talked about stress in terms of like under eating and over exercising, which with HA. But there's also another layer of poor brain signaling, which impacts the menstrual cycle. So this is kind of cool. I just recently learned about this. So how stress affects your cycle. So chronic stress and elevated cortisol, which is your stress hormone, can disrupt the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, the HPO axis, which is your hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, leading to a shutdown in ovulation and therefore irregular or anovulatory periods. The role of trauma that plays into this is if you have a history of trauma or recent trauma, emotional or physical, including PTSD, this can keep the nervous system in fight or flight mode. Fight or flight. It doesn't know if you're going to get eaten by a bear or if it's just reeling from a traumatic response. This disrupts hormone signaling and can lead to an irregular absent period. I don't think this is ever talked about. Trauma alone can result in a missing or irregular period. Even if you're eating enough, even if you don't have PCOS, this alone. Because if we take a step back, think about it. Like your period, if you're ovulating and having a period, it's your body's way of signaling, hey, it's safe. I can house a baby if you wanted to. You're, biologically, if our body doesn't feel safe, if it thinks we're going to get eaten by a bear or something bad's going to happen to us, it's not going to want a baby growing inside of us because it knows that it's at risk. So if your body's constantly in fight or flight, it doesn't know that we're not in modern times or we're not going to get eaten by a bear. It just knows that it's not safe to house a baby. So this is a really big gap that, like I said, I don't hear anyone talking about. The other thing too are concussions. So there's some research showing that post-concussion syndrome can disrupt hormonal signaling and may delay or cause absent periods. So if you've had concussions in your life, that HPO axis might be broken down, or there might be some sort of gap there where your brain isn't signaling to your ovaries that it's okay to ovulate or that it can ovulate, or it's just not able to do that. If there is something like that that's happened to you, that's something to consider in your timeline, in your story. So I always will ask my clients when we're dealing with any type of symptom, I I want us to go back and think, okay, when did this first start? What was going on? And that's beyond eating and nutrition, right? Like, this is what was going on in your environment, what was going on with your job, what was going on with your relationships, what was going on, because that can give us really key insights. And a lot of these things people don't think about, which rightfully so, right? Like, that's not your job, but it can be really cool what we uncover. So healing from concussions is, rest, obviously, proper nutrition, reducing stress, and restoring that hormone balance, which, depending on what we find with that, there are specific things we can do to restore that post concussion. PTSD, or chronic stress, obviously this is getting professional support from a therapist. It is working through that and regulating your nervous system to know that it is safe. It is safe to ovulate. It is safe to do the things it needs to do to divert attention away to other body systems, including your hormones, so they can do their job. Other things too with this, besides reducing stress, is, mind body practices. So, like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, nutrient dense food, some adaptogens like ashwagandha might be helpful here. I don't want everyone just to start taking ashwagandha because, again, we can't out supplement a poor diet or the root cause issue, right? If you're dealing with PTSD, ashwagandha isn't going to do anything. Or, chamomile tea isn't going to do anything. It might help with winding you down, but it's not going to solve the true problem. So, closing thoughts here. Three reasons that you might be having an irregular missing period after coming off birth control are hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is caused by undereating, disordered eating, overexercising; PCOS, which is a minutia of a diagnosis, but often includes irregular periods, hirsutism, maybe acne, high testosterone levels, inflammation of some sort, and or stress and trauma, specifically concussions, PTSD. So the big takeaway here is, as always, work with a provider to figure out what your story is, what your specific root cause is. It's not as simple as saying, oh, eat this, don't eat this, take this supplement, wait it out. There's so much that goes into this work. And your period is your fifth vital sign. That's worth mentioning again. It's something that needs to be addressed because it can have long-term consequences if you're not having a period. Okay. The last thing I will say before I move into how I'm nourishing myself is that irregular periods and missing periods don't mean you're broken. If you're listening to this and you've been struggling with this issue for months, for years, you're not alone. I myself struggled with that. I was missing a period for over 10 years when I was on birth control, and who knows how long. Like, I didn't know how to track my ovulation when I got off birth control. That's why I'm bringing guests on to teach you guys how to do it, because that's something that's important and we all should learn how to do. So I don't know when I technically started ovulating after the pill. And I work with a lot of women who have come off and they just feel so helpless and they don't get any support from their doctors or their OBs or their gynecologists. So you're not alone. You just need the right support and the right plan. How I'm nourishing myself this week. So this plays really well into this episode because it is nervous system support. So it's just been a pretty crazy and stressful month, and that really showcased itself in my body over the past couple of weeks. And so I was having lots of symptoms and I finally pegged it down to, okay, this is my nervous system. I'm someone, I am constantly in fight or flight. That's something I've had a history of stress and, nothing traumatic, thankfully. It's just my personality of being a type A person, perfectionist person who owns her own business and is growing it and doing all the things and just trying to also live life at the same time. So I finally was able to accept that it was my nervous system telling me, slow the F down. So I invested in Vital Side, which is an online program and community that has online modules, and it's all about retraining your brain. to acclimate to stress, to respond differently, so that when you get stressed, you don't just automatically jump to fight or flight, which is what happens to me. If a stressful message comes up or, you know, I feel stressed about the next day, it's like my stomach drops, like I start sweating, like instantly my heart rate starts going up. It allows you to retrain your brain with specific practices to prevent that from happening and to stimulate and strengthen your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. So I just started this and I've been loving it. It's a self-paced course, and then there's an opportunity for live calls if you want them. Um, but I actually really like it because I've done talk therapy before, and I definitely, think it's great for some people. And I tried starting it back up again in the fall because I was just having a tough time then as well. And it just wasn't what I was looking for. I didn't need to talk things out. Like I just needed actionable strategies to help me regulate myself that I could reuse over time. So I really love Vital Side because it gives me homework. It gives me things to work on in between sessions and it's self-paced. So if I'm feeling like doing an hour at a time, cool. But what they say is they only require 20 minutes per day, which I think is really cool. So I love the structure of it. I feel like it's so helpful for my personality and exactly what I need right now. And I love it so much that I've actually started incorporating it into my VIP one-on-one coaching program. So any new clients that sign up with me, they get 3 months free of Vital Side to add to their routine because most other women that I'm working with also struggle with the same thing of difficulty slowing down, difficulty regulating, difficulty de-stressing. So I find that this is something that will be a really helpful thing to incorporate. So I'm really excited about it. So that's how I'm nourishing myself this week is just going through that, committing to it, making time to do it, and recognizing that it's just as important for me as, fueling my body with nutritious food, as exercise, as taking my supplements every single day, as my mineral mocktails. It's so, so important to care for our mental health as well. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like, subscribe, share it with a friend or someone who needs to hear this. And if you're on Apple listening, please leave a review. I really, really appreciate it. Until next time, stay nourished.